Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Kate Almquist-Knopp, Director of the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, and welcome to our conversation today with Her Excellency Bineta Diop, African Union Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security. Before I introduce our special guest and we begin our program, I would like to say a brief word about the Africa Center. The Africa Center for Strategic Studies serves as a forum for research, academic programs, and the exchange of ideas with the aim of enhancing citizen security by strengthening the effectiveness and accountability of African institutions. We are a U.S. Department of Defense academic regional center located at the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. We carry out our mission of advancing African security by expanding understanding, providing a trusted platform for dialogue, building enduring partnerships, and catalyzing strategic solutions. We seek to generate relevant insight and analysis that informs practitioners and policymakers on topical and emerging security trends and on effective responses to dynamic and complex security challenges. And recognizing that addressing such serious challenges can only come about through candid and thoughtful exchanges, the Africa Center provides opportunities for partners to exchange views on shared interests and sound practices. This kind of dialogue, we believe, infused with real-world experiences and fresh analysis, provides an opportunity for continued learning and catalyzes concrete actions. So we're delighted to have Her Excellency Bineta Diop, African Union Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, with us today to discuss the importance of gender for security in Africa and around the world. Before we begin our conversation, however, we have a second very special guest that I'm especially pleased to introduce for an opening comment. Ms. Chidi Blyden is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Africa. In this role, she is responsible for managing the day-to-day defense relationship between the United States and African nations. She also supports the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy and Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs by developing and implementing key security strategies and policy in African nations, deepening defense and security cooperation with 54 countries. Ms. Blyden, amongst other things, and you'll find her full bio available on our website, served in the Obama administration as a special assistant to the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for African Affairs. So she has returned to an office that she knows very, very well. And we're most especially pleased and proud that she began her career in security studies here at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies as a senior academic research associate and our academic operations coordinator. Ms. Blyden, welcome. Over to you for your comment.
Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you, Director Almquist-Knopp, and to the Africa Center for Strategic Studies for convening this very important and timely discussion. Your Excellency, Madam Diop, good evening. Salam alaikum and nangader. Distinguished guests and participants joining us from across the continent and beyond, it is a privilege to be here with you today, at least virtually. Today marks my first engagement as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for African Affairs, and I could not be more pleased that is to speak with you about the importance of women, peace, and security. I'm fortunate that my dual continent upbringing between the United States and Sierra Leone allowed me to witness the various roles and benefits of including women at every level of peace and security in societies. My experience as an adolescent girl in Sierra Leone at the height of its civil war was an introduction to the security challenges that women face. Working at the highest levels of defense and security in the US government has been and continues to be an affirmation of the impact that women can make when they are not only included, but are leading efforts. So for me, it's only right that my first official duty be to speak at today's forum on a topic that truly embodies my journey to the role I'm serving in today. When women provide their voices, we all benefit from their experiences, creative solutions, and leadership. The United States stands beside the African Union and African nations in their calls to advance women, peace, and security, or WPS. The US's commitment to the WPS agenda in Africa and beyond represents a core component of President Biden's promise to promote equality and equity for all, regardless of gender and gender identity. It also reflects our department's belief that implementing WPS is imperative to national and global security. Put simply, by empowering women and girls, we can all more effectively achieve our security objectives. In many African nations, the Department of Defense works alongside African governments and multilateral organizations towards shared security objectives. We support our partners in countering violent extremism, enhancing maritime security, and supporting the professionalization of African armed forces. We know that our ability to achieve each of these goals with our African partners is strengthened by our concurrent efforts to advance WPS at home, on the continent, and globally. The Department of Defense's commitment to WPS is grounded in three overarching convictions. First, that when armed forces enable the meaningful participation of women across their ranks, they are more effective in analyzing, planning for, and engaging with diverse populations they seek to protect and influence. As just one example, United Nations troop contributing countries that prioritize the training and deployment of women, including female engagement teams, have demonstrated added effectiveness in engaging with local communities. Second, that gender considerations are essential in assessing operational environments. Women and girls, who make up half of the population and fill critical decision-making roles within their communities, can both enable and undermine peace. It is important to consider the various roles they play and how gender impacts our approach to conflict. Military planners who overlook gender in their analysis do so at the risk of creating an incomplete picture of conflict drivers and solutions. And our third conviction is that women and girls often require enhanced and tailored protections in conflict and humanitarian settings. Both state and non-state actors actively exploit, victimize, and abuse women and girls to instill fear in populations, compel support for illicit activities, and maintain territorial and psychological strongholds to advance their cause. In the Lake Chad Basin, for example, Boko Haram's abductions and exploitation of women and girls have enabled them to terrorize communities. Preparing for the different security and humanitarian needs of men, women, boys, and girls is essential to effectively prevent and respond to conflict and crisis. Since the passage of the UN SCR 1325, the international community has witnessed remarkable progress towards national and regional WPS policy. With 25 national action plans, African nations and the African Union are leading the way, thanks to the stewardship of champions such as Madame Diop. African nations have also set an example by leading in contributions of women peacekeepers to United Nations missions and elevating women to senior decision-making roles in defense institutions. We welcome the opportunities these efforts bring for the United States to work together with African nations on WPS implementation and to learn from each other. Over the last decade, the US Department of Defense has made strides in advancing the WPS agenda. The enactment of the US's WPS strategy and the Department of Defense's own WPS implementation plan have been instrumental in this national effort. However, we know we have a lot more work ahead as we face the challenge of turning policy into practice. We are working to further institutionalize WPS across our defense institutions by integrating WPS into policies, plans, doctrine, training, and education, and encouraging our senior leadership to support WPS within their chain of command. For example, we are taking steps to address sexual assault and harassment in the force, which runs counter to our core military values and impedes the meaningful participation of women in the armed forces. On March 24th, the Secretary of Defense launched a 90-day independent review commission on sexual assault in the military to review department policies and processes as directed by President Biden. The Independent Review Commission will conclude its work at the end of June with a full report to President Biden and Secretary Austin detailing recommendations for systemic change across 4 lines of effort: accountability, prevention, climate and culture, and victim care and support. The challenges the department is tackling today are ones that our counterparts across the world and across Africa also face. Within this shared struggle, we see opportunities for us to exchange lessons learned, amplify our calls for change, and collectively advance programs and initiatives. The WPS agenda is truly a global challenge and as such requires global collaboration. The Department of Defense works with numerous African nations to exchange best practices and expertise to advance the WPS agenda. In addition to pursuing independent actions that advocate for the adoption of WPS principles, the department is working to integrate gender considerations across the full spectrum of US security assistance, training, activities with partner nations on the continent. As we look to expand and deepen these WPS engagements, we view regional solutions as an essential piece of this effort. We applaud the African Union, the African Women Leaders Network, and the FemWise African Network in amplifying the voices of women in peacekeeping processes, and we welcome opportunities to work together. I leave you today with 2 messages. First, the advancement of the WPS agenda is a national and global security imperative. Second, our nations all face challenges in WPS implementation, but we can overcome them by working together. The US Department of Defense and the United States more broadly stands with the African Union and African nations in our shared pursuit of the WPS agenda. We are just at the beginning of our effort in implementing WPS, and we look forward to our collaboration. Kate, I want to thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective with you today. And Madame Diop, it has been an honor to share the virtual stage with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blyden, for taking the time to join us, especially for colleagues' awareness in her first week in her new role as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, and I think a true testament to the commitment I know that we will have from your leadership in this very important role. So thank you so much for your words and for sharing the perspective of the Defense Department. We appreciate it very much. And now to introduce our main guest, Her Excellency Bineta Diop, and our conversation today. The African Union's commitment to gender equality and the Women, Peace and Security agenda is represented in several frameworks and processes. Perhaps most notable amongst these is the African Union's Agenda 2063, which seeks to achieve inclusive and sustainable economic growth from 2013 to 2063. The agenda places gender equality at the center of Africa's development, commits to end all forms of oppression and gender-based discrimination, and calls for Africa to work towards full gender equality and the empowerment of women in all spheres of life at national, regional, and continental levels. With a clear commitment to these goals, there has been an increase in the number of women in senior level positions within the Commission, including the nomination of Her Excellency Bineta Diop as the Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security in January 2014. Madame Diop is also the founder and president of Femme Africa Solidarité, an international NGO that seeks to foster, strengthen, and promote the leadership role of women in conflict prevention, management, and resolution in Africa. She has therefore played an instrumental role across all of these leadership responsibilities she's had in achieving gender parity within the African Union Commission's leadership and in the adoption of the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa, as well as the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa. So welcome, Madame Diop. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much, Kate. Let me start by thanking you for giving me this opportunity to interact with the students and your alumni of the African Center for Strategic Studies. Even though today it is virtually, but I appreciate this conversation as we know that it is going to be a conversation to share our experience and exchange on our different perspective. Thank you.
Well, I should also add to your bio, Madame Diop, that just like Ms. Blyden, we share a history together, and we're especially proud that Madame Diop was a participant at the Africa Center's very first program, which took place in Dakar, Senegal in 1999. So over 20 years ago, we began our history as a center, and that was our senior leaders seminar. So Madame Diop has walked with us over these years in her various roles, and it is a special honor to have you back with us again today. Thank you.
So I'm very happy to be one of your first alumni at the center when you came to Dakar, and I learned a lot from the center. I take this opportunity also to congratulate Madam Shidi Blyden for her recent appointment as Deputy Secretary of Defense. And I am sure in the discussion, we will talk about why women leadership matter. So congratulations for her and her statement, which really emphasized why women's roles in peace and security in the world is important. So thank you for setting the tone, Madam Blyden.
Wonderful. Well, Madam Diop, maybe since I don't know that all of our audience will necessarily be familiar with your mandate and your agenda as the African Union Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, perhaps we could start there and just hear from you briefly. Why was this position created and what is most important to you in terms of your role and responsibilities, and maybe a little bit about you specifically for this year in 2021. What are you hoping to see happen in this agenda on the continent?
I think, let me first say that, Kate, to put it into the context on our continent, I think it's, Madam Blyden alluded to a conflict zone in Africa like Sierra Leone and other places. So we need to recognize that, from the 19s up to now, Africa have been the theater of numerous conflict. The Manu River region is one of these, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, but also the genocide in Rwanda, where we know that, and the DRC, the Great Lakes region, you name them. So Africa have experienced a lot of conflict. And within the conflict, what we have seen as phenomenon is violence against women and rape, which have been used as tactic of war. So it's important we see this, where Africa were. Of course, we have been able to address some of those critical issues, but in the meantime, 1325, which is Women, Peace and Security agenda adopted by the Security Council, is born in Africa in Windhoek 20 years ago. So it was normal that the African Union, as you state, to have a lot of protocols and resolution, started to look into implementation and action. I think that's why my mandate came from, to say we cannot just adopt laws and procedure and rules and regulation. We need now to see how to implement those laws. And to do that, we needed not to see women only as victims in the lens of victims, but see them as catalysts and peace actors, as agents of change. I think this is bringing within the institution another voice, not just the leaders of Africa who are majority of men, but started bringing the women voices and their faces into the African Union. So that's how the then chairperson, Madam Zuma, from my own experience, we have been working with the AU in many domains. You have named them in the protocol on human rights, women's rights, in the gender equality agenda, etc., requested me from my own experience to say, can you be the voice of the voiceless within the African Union, and looking into our instrument and see how we can translate it into action. And my mandate was renewed by the new chairperson, Musa Faki Mohammed, to ensure, as I said, the voice of women and girls. And it was also a demand from African women. It was a demand from the panel of the wise. It was a demand from Africa. So it was then necessary to appoint a special envoy, maybe with my small experience in there. So you have asked what, by saying what will be your priority, is then what you have done. What have you done? What I have done was, first of all, to look at the architecture of the African Union and the member state and see what were the missing. And I said action, and action was the missing link. So for us, number one, we put I would call it an accountability mechanism, because you cannot adopt strategies or action plan without making sure that you have a framework to report, because you need to measure your progress and come up with some kind of success stories or implementation on the ground. So that's why we put in place a monitoring mechanism, which is called the Continental Result Framework, with 41 indicators, and which have been adopted by our member state and the Peace and Security Council. So my first advocacy was to make sure that member states have action plan, first of all, those who don't have it. We started with 17 action plan, and now we are 30 action plan. More than half of African countries. And my goal is to make sure that 55 member states will adopt a national action plan, or 50, at least all of them will adopt national action plan. And using the indicators which is being there within those, the CRF, the Continental Result Framework. We talk about the 3 pillars, or even the 4 pillars, which is participation, protection, prevention, but also relief and recovery. And we are adding new issues even on new challenges such as climate change or other issues as well, because this is important. And crises like we have seen, like COVID, which are very new, but which are security threat as well. So I wanted just to say that it's a work in progress. I want to recognize and thank USAID for their support in providing the resource to facilitate the development of the Continental Result Framework. So I maybe will talk about how we are working with member states at local level to make sure that the action are taken on the ground as well, and affect how it impacts on the life of the women. Thank you.
Well, that's certainly rings true to our ears at the Africa Center, as we're seeking, as I said in our mission statement, to catalyze concrete actions. And we know that translating commitments and protocols and lofty statements sometimes into tangible change and benefit for those that we're seeking to support is really where the key crux of what we commit to, and how these actions translate on the ground comes down to it. So we'll do our part, I hope, to help further socialize these action plans, and which countries have committed to women, peace, and security. Specific goals and objectives as part of the Continental Results Framework. And I know that members of the audience may have more questions about that and how they can find that for each of their countries, so that across our Africa Center community, we can be reinforcing these efforts. You mentioned COVID-19, and given the very significant magnitude that this pandemic is having for all of our societies, I wonder if we should spend a moment or two to see how you're seeing the impact for women and the women, peace, and security agenda on the continent right now. And is COVID-19 impeding efforts to move forward on these national action plans and to monitor against the results framework? Or how is it that you see this challenge as it affects so many parts of our society, and just even the way we're doing business today, right? Being virtually together on the Zoom platform. Maybe we could spend a moment or two on that.
Yeah, thank you, Kate, because this is the context where we are right now with COVID-19, who started with to be a health issue. But as we have seen, it has impacted also on the security issues as well, and become also a security threat, but also social and economic threat to our continent, but to the world. And what we have seen as well is violence against women everywhere, at home, not just in the conflict, but at home in the world. It's not just an African phenomenon, but we have seen that, and studies, as I said, the study that I look at commissioned by Women Deliver, which interview people from refugee, and I really wanted to look at the displaced, the refugee, post-conflict setting across 15 African countries. And the study found that 73% of respondents experienced an increase in intimate partner violence, and 51% experienced sexual violence due to the lockdown and economic stress caused by the pandemic. So the women that are in conflict zone, as I said, and non-conflict situation, but especially conflict zone, have been doubly affected by this pandemic. And also it has generated other crises, the food crisis, not just the violence, but the food crisis, especially the humanitarian crisis as well, where we can take the issue of the Mozambique, in northern Mozambique right now, and the massive displaced people. And you see the displacement without protection, etc. So we see is another threat that we are experiencing right now. And that's why in the Continental Result Framework, we have been able to include, as I said, those crises that we're going to see, because as I understood from the scientific perspective, it's not going to be the last pandemic that we're going to see. So if this is the case, let's make sure that we have, we address the issue of prevention in this with key indicators to prevent, because it's better to prevent than to cure. We have seen in the issue of Ebola in Liberia, the Sierra Leone, etc., how it was tackled during the pandemic, women leadership, and it will come to the issue, women leadership matter, because the communities start engaging, the communities themselves, the women at the front. We have seen that in the health sector, the majority are women. And how do we protect them? The African Union have adopted strategy to fight the pandemic, including, distributing the necessary equipment. And the women have been at the front themselves at the beginning to distribute the mask, to work with the security personnel where it is necessary as well. So I think we have managed to make sure that the African Union also adopt a gender strategy on responding to COVID, to make sure that, and we had a debate by ministers of foreign affairs, by ministers of health, minister of other sectors, gender ministry, to make sure that they debate the impact on the ground on the women and the population, but also they made a recommendation to the head of state, which we did, to adopt that strategy that will go now underground to respond. So it's not just to respond to COVID right now, but post-COVID reconstructed, because we have seen the gaps in education, the gap in the health system, the women reproductive health and rights have been impacted underground. So those are security. How do we now come into human security? I think the whole issue is, how do we address this to rebuild back better, and maybe to restart the button, but making sure that we have into the security, we have also human security dimension, where we involve the population and the people, but we provide them with the necessary tools, opening for them to be able to address it, because it's not one who can do it, but all of us who can be involved in prevention. Thank you.
Yes, it rings so true, and maybe helps in some of our focus at the Africa Center. The last few years, we've been looking at national security strategy processes in Africa, and specifically how some countries have been able to adopt very inclusive and participatory processes to formulate their national security strategies, which takes at the center more of a citizen security or even human security dimension to it, to try and bring together more holistically, both the development challenges and priorities, as well as the traditional security priorities that we think of when it comes to national security. And so I wonder if in light of what you've just said, what advice or recommendations would you have for colleagues who may be joining us that are focused on putting these processes together for their countries, or doing the monitoring of the implementation of them, so that we could really understand better the different dimensions of the challenges for women and men, and girls and boys, as we know that we don't all experience society the same way, and how women could be more fully part of these processes, either within the security sector itself, or by being part of the consultation process as national security strategies are being drafted, and hopefully citizen voices are being consulted in terms of what is important going forward.
Let me just maybe for our audience to say that the women's participation in security strategy matter, and why it matter. It's for me for really two main reasons. If security is meant to be a security of citizens, it cannot be achieved without the involvement of half of the population. So you need to have the citizen to be part of the design, but also to understand and in the implementation. So because we are not just assuring the security of the state apparatus, security of the office bearers, we have seen right now what is happening in some countries with the lockdown, the young people without job who have been in the street, not being understanding why this security is put on them. They don't know. So they are in a denial and attacking in the street, and so many challenges that we have seen in some of African countries. So we need to, so that's number one. For me, the people have to be part, and the young and the women and also the young boys, as I said. The second, for me, it's including women. The strategy of inclusion is a right, not a privilege. It's our right. When you look at the African instrument, the Maputo Protocol, in its Article 10, stipulates clearly that women have the right to peace and security. So I refer to, sometime to Gandhi, who said that Mahatma Gandhi, who said that, and I quote, "Whatever you do for me without me is against me." So if you are building the security apparatus of the country, you need to make sure that women are there and the people understand, at least, because they should be not just the recipient, but part of it. So let me again say, 1325 have come with all these pillars, as I said: protection, participation, and we make sure that we increase the participation of women, because then you will see the change. It's the accountability you have. You spoke on the delivery, it need to be there. So why I like the work that you do, I applaud the work of the center, because you bring the civilian, and I have experience in myself in your first training in Senegal, to interact with the military and make sure that we have such a dialogue on how to protect our country, because it will be all of us. I think Madam Bryden have already mentioned the issue of terrorists, because you see how they're engaging with the young boys in the Sahel, in the Lake Chad Basin, recruiting them because they are without jobs and so on. But suicide bombers at the end. And I have met, when I was visiting Lake Chad Basin, somebody who already, a woman, who have been a suicide bomber, you know, by, she escaped. But when I interviewed her, you could see that it was without knowing what is happening, she get involved in a terrorist act. And now then, miraculously, she didn't die. Her colleague died. Somebody else who has another bomb died. She survived, you know? But you can see the story behind it is one of the reasons you have to say, include the population. Include them in, for example, early warning and early response. Include them to detect. Include them in the intelligence gathering. Include them into the security. Include the police, for example, who have the possibility to be very close to the community, and put more women into those apparatus. Make sure that women are there, because women talk you know, easily with women. You know, when it comes to rape, when it comes to protection, when it comes to many other issues, women easily can close the door and exchange with women. So confidence building with the women in the community is important. So I think I recommend to the center the work that we are doing to put national action plan, and you are doing national strategy at national level, accompanying our member states, our security personnel, national security, the defense force, and so on. We work together with the African Union, with our member states, and the women's organization to make sure that we understand those, what we want to implement, the indicators that we are putting in place, but also putting that platform, because what we need is a national platform to make sure that we adopt a strategy, but we follow up, we monitor it. And I think a gender strategy in each country. Senegal is working on that as a gender strategy for the force, for the security forces, but also training them. And this is what you're doing, train them before we deploy. You know, I will maybe another time talk about my experience with the Somali, but this is where African Union have our troops. But I was the first woman to get into Somalia from the, even not just women, but the first high level to visit Somalia, where nobody was going there, 2014. And I went to meet the women because, for example, Ethiopia has a lot of women in the troops, the contributing troops, and other countries as well. So it was necessary to look at the needs of those women in there. What kind of equipment they need, different from the one from the men. So this is important that we equip them before they leave the country, train the men on zero tolerance policy, so they understand it, put in place the code of conduct, but also make sure that they have safe space into the compound as well. And one of the things they told me, for example, is, you know, we want to be leaders at the front of the battle. Why is only, you know, we have the same grade, but what's happening is the men that are still, but this is no longer a war that you have to show the muscles, but it's a war that you need to have techniques, and we women, we have it. It's a war that you need to use your brain and your intelligence. It's a war that even the machine you're conducting, the men and women can do it easily. So we want to be at the front, you know, not just we want to serving the tea and the coffee to the generals, but we want to be at the front. So that's some of the experience we have seen at the country, and you are doing very, very well, the center, by equipping you know, in each of our countries where you are deploying your knowledge and your expertise. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madame Diop. You've just now, I think, given us a couple of examples of why involving women at all levels of security processes, from violence and conflict prevention to conflict resolution and sustainable peace building is essential, whether we're speaking at the local, the national, or the regional levels. And the example from Somalia is really helpful to think about it in practical terms and to see women as being agents of change and implementers of security, for instance, in what the African Union forces are seeking to do in that country. And not just as the victims and the recipients of the negative effects of the conflict that is taking place there. So I think it's really important, as we discussed beforehand, to be reminded of some of the success stories or the places where we're seeing some change. And I think, as you said, where the glass is half full instead of half empty in terms of seeing some progress and being able to incorporate women and utilize the full potential that we all bring as part of humanity to some of these very complex challenges. Now, we will, from our part, I think, seek to bring these two threads together even more intentionally from our national security strategy work, which I encourage colleagues who aren't familiar yet to find that on our website under the programs tab. And in fact, we just had a session earlier in the week to look at monitoring and evaluation of national security strategies. And one of those key facets of that needs to be seeing where the intersection is between the national action plans on women, peace and security and national security strategy are. So we will take that as some further homework to continue to bring those two pieces together. Madam Diop, before we perhaps open it up to some questions from our audience, I wondered if you would just share with us a little bit about the African Women Leaders Network, because I think this is one of the glass half full stories that would be great for colleagues to know about. Why was this network created? You were instrumental in that, and what does the network seek to do through its chapters across the continent?
Yeah, thank you so much again for that questions. I think we have created in the African Union a mechanism that called FemWise, because it was necessary that some of the gap that we found in mediation, that we are able to make sure that the men will no longer say, where are the face of the women? So FemWise is meant to bring expertise to mediation. So you could see that it tackled really the issue of dialogue and peace and security and bringing the human dimension. But we say that if we need to prevent, we need to have more women. And women leadership matters. Let me tell you an example. And in the transformation of Africa, we needed more women voices in everywhere. At the local level, at the law level, at the highest level, the leadership matters. And leadership is not just the top, it's all over that we have seen. When you look at, for example, the example of US, the election of Vice President Kamala Harris, it has been so much welcome. It's not only her. Today we have Chidi Blyden at all levels. So if you need to transform, and bring change, changing attitude, bringing peace and security stability, you make sure that also that the face of the women, the face of the young people, and the face of so many, those who are living in handicap, those who are indifferent, you need to bring them at the front. And this matters not just to make it as a symbolic, but it has to be a critical mass. And that's why I started by what you are doing in America. And in the transformation of Africa, we found that there was a need. Why do we just had one president in Africa that have been elected, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf? It's not enough. We need to have more. There are other presidents that have been there. We have Tanzania now, we have Ethiopia, we have, but one elected who went through the ballot is the only one is Liberia. We need to have more. We have a lot of women parliamentarians. Rwanda is the biggest one in the world, looking into their own experience. And we always say, why is it from countries that emerge from conflict that are able to put women at the front? Because they have been victims. Before, they are the only one who can rebuild the nation, who can reconcile. Those are some elements that we research on, but we need to do it even in prevention, where we know that women need to be there at the beginning to make sure that their issues are within the agenda. So AWLN is born in Africa. We have the patron, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who is the big, we have to right now 25 chapters of AWLN in many places in Africa, but we need to have more of those national chapters. Is a support by African Union and UN, but is a mobilizing tool, but to make sure that we work on political participation, those who want to emerge, but also to have an intergenerational exchange and dialogue with the young people to pass the baton. We are gone. This next generation need to have our own experience because they have expertise. So what we're trying to do is to have the dialogue and make sure that the young girls take the women's human rights issue as their own priority as well. So AWLN is also a creator fund for women entrepreneurs as well. So we look into the economy, we look into peace and security, and we look into political as well and other social issues. For example, on peace and security, I conduct various solidarity missions underground with my sister Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General. We do joint mission, solidarity mission underground. We went to the Lake Chad Basin, to Nigeria, to Somalia, to so many places in Africa, the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Eritrea, but to talk to the leaders as African women leaders, to talk to the leader, to the head of state, to sit down and analyze the situation, to talk to the partners, but most and foremost is to go to the ground and talk to the population, to the women. That's where we met the suicide bombers to understand why they are engaged in such a terrorist act. We sit with the boys that don't have job. We sit sometimes with the terrorists as well to ask them, those we call them for example, in other places to say, where are the rebellion? Let's meet with them and understand if we are able to reach out to them, those who are able to come to sit and start having a dialogue with those who have disarmed and start having the dialogue with the government or other institution. So do we go to the traditional leaders because they are very important as well. So AWLN is about, making sure also that we don't do it ourselves, but we understand and we bring like the center to say we have gap here. The center can come and support this government because this is what the government wants right now, is to link the different actors to impact at the local level, because at the end is the local level that is important. See, this is about AWLN and 25, it's a movement, a real great movement with Amina, myself, Pumzile, but also not the UN and AU, but underground with all the political leaders, African women, Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, but civil society, the Lema Bowie, for example, Nobel Peace Laureate and others, to mobilize and also to brainstorm on how we are going to support the development. We have a huge agenda, Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, the transformation of the continent. So we need to have our voice and the voice of the young women in this. So that's the platform we are building with AWLN. another great one, just to add, is the agriculture sector. Because if we want to rebuild back better, we need to engage also to go back to feed Africa. And Africa have, the resources that require to make sure that we don't die on hunger. And our family and the 70% of the population are women. The population that are growing food are women. So we need to empower them. And this is one of the pleas we are doing. And it's linked to climate change. It's a very much to say smart agriculture, but also where the women will be the driving with a lot innovation, technical part, and so on. And here I see the role of some also, security personnel that can also engage on the ground at local level. That linkage is to rebuild back better because security is key in those areas because we have a lot of armed group most of the time to control the resources, to control the land, etc. And we need to engage with the women. I stop there because I'm sure that there are questions to come as well.
Well, thank you, Madame Diop. I think you've given us a lot to think on, and we do want to turn to some audience questions here next. I know for the Africa Center that we're excited by AWLN and AWLN for colleagues who are new to it, the African Women Leaders Network, and to see how we can invite colleagues from these 25 chapters to join Africa Center programs to continue what you said you experienced from the outset, where we can bring together colleagues from across the not just the security sector, but also these other very important sectors and dimensions of our society, whether civil society, whether those who are leading on our food security policies and climate change mitigation and health and other responses, so that we're seeing how all of these dimensions intersect and support each other, we hope, in the best way possible. So I hope that colleagues listening will also know of this and see it as a resource as well to tap in to women leaders across the continent in these very many dimensions. So thank you.
And office, Kate, and led by Fatima, our representative Ambassador Fatima in New York, who is leading at AWLN in New York as well. In the African Union office, our ambassador in New York.
Thank you for highlighting Ambassador Fatima Mohammed, another dear colleague and alumni of the Africa Center, who has helped us to make many of these connections. And so colleagues can certainly be in touch with her office, the African Union permanent mission to the United Nations in New York, as well as with Madame Diop's office at the African Union Commission in Addis Ababa to find out more information. But now perhaps I'll turn to Dr. Shannon Smith, our Director of Engagement and our faculty lead on Women, Peace and Security for the Africa Center, who's been following the chat line. For colleagues who haven't yet done so, please do put your questions for Madame Diop on the chat line. Unfortunately, as I said, we will not be enabling our audio today, given how many colleagues we have on the line, which is a good sign overall of the interest and the desire to be part of this conversation. So Shannon, over to you to bring to us some of the questions from colleagues who have tuned in.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Madam Diop, for a absolutely terrific discussion. So I've been collecting questions from the chat line, and I welcome our colleagues to continue to post them. We'll get to as many as we can. And I will, I'm putting a few of them together, and I'll give you a couple at once, and then we'll return to the chat line, and I'll give you some more as time permits. I want to start with the first question that we received, which is very timely with COVID-19 and the immediate challenges that have been exposed. The question is, with the large number of women in the informal economy, what protective measures are being applied for their security? thinking about the security of women in the informal economy. And for the second question, I would like to put a couple together which have come in, which have to do with this point about national action plans and how they are an important step in this. But several people have asked about how, what are the major achievements of national action plans, and more broadly, how will we measure progress on the women, peace, and security agenda? And finally, within that, how can women's organizations be brought more fully into this process and into the security process, and the strengths they bring, but also maybe some of the obstacles they face. So there's three for you. One on women in the informal economy and their security needs. One on national action plans and measuring progress. And finally, how can we bring more women's organizations into the security process?
Thank you so much, Shannon, for this, the question, which is really very pertinent as we experiencing COVID-19, which have been a surprise to all of us, and we had really to adjust. But let me just remind the audience that we have adopted something that is that can bring trade and economic development recovery in our continent. It's the Africa Free Trade Area, which is opening our borders and making sure that Africa can trade with Africa. So I think that is one of the instruments that we need to celebrate while in the meantime we are experiencing COVID. So you can see the women traders from West Africa, those mama bens who are in informal economy. So what getting together and saying, we are going to engage into digital, for example. It's becoming to revolutionize also the digital economy that we have seen. How we can sell from Senegal to Nigeria by using the digital. You just use your mobile phone where you are, and you are able also to access the information, and you are able to also to sell and buy. But there have been challenges. We need to recognize there are some solutions that they are putting in place at each country, but there are also challenges because the lockdown, the women that are in the market that were selling their products, their agriculture product, could not be out anymore. And that's why they're transforming themselves, selling from house, but also taking all the necessary measure to protect themselves from COVID as well. And we see them even preparing the mask, selling the mask to adjust themselves into the market as well. So I think it's, when you look at a country like Kenya, and they have a lot of women in leadership position in defense. We have Monica in defense, a women, great one, ministers of foreign affairs, etc. They have put a procurement, maybe I think it is more than 30% for the national procurement for women. So it is really something that can help women to have access to bigger market, So we don't just need to, for example, we can build the road. The women can do that. They have the enterprise as well. That's the formal, getting out from formal to get into informal to get into formal. And we need to support them. For example, the Africa Women Leaders Network have created a fund, Africa Women Leaders Fund, which is now lodged in the Standard Bank. We are going to give credit to women entrepreneurs to scale it up, to make sure that they can access funding with a low rate interest. And this is an initiative of AWLN, and we approached the bank, and we have investors who really wanted to get involved with the women to make sure that we support them. Another initiative we are doing with the World Economic Forum, is making sure also that in the food system, we bring public-private sector together to work to make sure that we double, scale up the production. And in the whole value chain of agriculture, where we have women from production to the, as we said, from production to the market, we have in the value chain, empower the women, their enterprise, their cooperatives, and multiply the products that they have. So there are initiatives that we are looking at, not just the health, because we can go also what we are doing right now on the health sector with the CDC in this, but with our commissioner in charge of trade, our commissioner in charge of economy, we are all working together to make sure that we empower those who are in informal economy to become formal. And some of them will still wanted to be informal because some don't want to be formalized, but we give them the necessary tool. Let's bring private sector to train you, to equip them. So they remain in this, but they become leader in their informal economy. Because what we need is leadership, even in the informal. If I have a shop, I wanted to be the first one in that shop to be recognized in my village on the work that I'm doing, and I can scale up. From one shop today, I can have 20 shops another day in other regions. So those are the way that we are seeing, and we are looking into connecting with the African Union. We are creating the space between between the public and the private sector, our government, but also the others. So on the National Action Plan, how to measure progress? I think it's in the National National Action Plan. As I have said, when we had 17, now we have 30 National Action Plan. It's not enough because it's not just designing them, but it's about implementing them. So how do we measure the progress? As I said, we have put indicators to measure the progress because you need to look at and to collect the data. So what we are doing at national level, my office is working with member states to have the platform which include Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of Defense, of Gender together around the National Action Plan, but with the parliamentary, because you need to be presented to the parliament. We don't create a National Action Plan that don't go into the development plan of the country. It should be embedded, even with the funding of it. It has to go to vetted by the parliament. So that's why we need that platform where women are included and they meet regularly to measure the progress when it comes to military, have been able to train our military before the deployment or not? Do we have a strategy put in place, etc.? And what I do as the AU with the chairperson office is to collect annual report from member states that have planned and the regional economic community. We have issued the first report, which for me is important for them to be accountable. They will tell us how much they have spent, how many they have trained, how many policy on, for example, on gender-based violence, etc. So we need to have those information from them. And that's why now AU is publishing an annual report on WPS in the continent. We have just finished the second report, which have been adopted by Peace and Security Council under the chairmanship of Egypt, and also we discuss it under the chairmanship of Kenya as well. So we are able really to make sure that we have that report on implementation. And lastly, the women's human rights defenders, the last point that you raised, there are a lot of harassment of those human rights, especially during this COVID lockdown, where we see the social media having been seen as we will say, a perturbateur, those who really fuel the conflict already happening because of the lockdown and the economic issues that we are facing. So what the women's that are human rights defenders have seen themselves, attacked as well, and not being sidelined sometimes, and not being part of the mechanism. But what we see is to make sure that we have protection law that also defend the women's human rights defenders by putting in place also the mechanism for them. There are laws that they can go and contest to say that, I have been attacked. I'm a journalist, for example, or I'm an NGO, etc. But the country have put in place the law to protect me. And I think that 1325 is also about that. So you can complain, but the whole movement in Africa is about that. When you see one of our sister attacked, AWLN does that. We have seen it in many places. It's not just politicians. Women politicians are often attacked every day. So the chain of solidarity should be there to support them, not to see them just as victims because they have been attacked. It's not just attacked by government, it's attacked by the population because misunderstanding, so we need to have the dialogue and the protection mechanism for women that are at the forefront. Women at the front line should be also protected because this is their right and they are part and parcel of this society. And this is where men come. Men have to take these issues, this agenda is a societal change. It's not about women, it's about a society. It's a transformation of a society. And I think more and more we are having the he for she. I again will quote some of the leaders of Africa. We have been hosted by President of Kenya to have an intergenerational dialogue with the young women. Every year we go to Kenya and we are able to have a retreat, and he's, as a man, also leading the conversation. So that is what we need to do to transmit to the girls and the boys on the dialogue and giving. I think we will have a lot of conflict continuing in a way or another. It's part of the nature, but we need to resolve. We need to sit down, as we say, under the baobab tree in Africa or wherever we are, to solve our difference without having to take arms and to solve some of those different or some of the conflict. So women victims should be protected as well. I stop there. Shannon.
Shannon, just before you give another round of questions, I want to give a shout out since Madame Diop has mentioned Kenya several times, including and especially our Kenyan Minister of Defense, Ambassador Monica Juma, who in fact has joined us for this webinar today. Her audio and video is not enabled, but she is listening and following along to this discussion, and clearly a leader across all of our communities in many respects. So thank you to Her Excellency Monica Juma for being with us on the webinar. We'll hope to bring a conversation with her for the Africa Center community in the future. But, thank you, Madame Diop.
Allow me also to say that my country, Senegal, and the other time I listened to Biram Diop, the General Diop, then we know that Senegal, as I said, have put in place strategy for gender equality into the force, but also that our parliament, when we were talking about leadership, we have the parity principle within our parliament, and we have almost 50-50 women in the parliament, 47 or at most 50%. Because of the zebra list, we are not equal 50-50 like in Rwanda, but we have really a huge number in our parliament, in our government as well. And I'm sure that in the coming elections, we will have more. I did not also mention that the parity at the AU, at the highest level, we have the parity principle. All the commissioners are 50-50, and the chair and the deputy chairs is a man and the deputy is a woman. So AU is really trying to make sure that we have, affirmative action and elevate the women leadership at the highest level. Yes, Shannon.
Thank you, Madam. And I want to thank all of the participants and observers who've posed questions for us. We're not going to be able to get to them all, but I think we can take your questions as an agenda for the Africa Center and for future webinars. The really rich list of questions dealing with women in the military and peacekeeping and climate change and a number of other very important points. Because we had so many questions on it, I do want to pose one more for you, Madam Diop, and combine several of these questions that have come up about the intersection between violent extremism and gender. And if you could talk to us a bit about its issue in many conflicts, not only in Africa, but in many parts of the world, and perpetrators from across the world can be an issue. Could you talk about how you see your work as a special envoy dealing with this question and what you see as some solutions in this very challenging problem?
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. This is one of the big areas that we need all of us to invest more, and I think it's really an agenda for all of us. The violence, because what happened in Africa is happening in Afghanistan, is happening and impacted in Europe and everywhere. And the phenomenon that it brings to some of those countries, when I visited in Nigeria with the issue of Boko Haram, and sit down with the victims in the refugee camps, but others, and sit with the leaders to discuss, and the Chibok girls to discuss what happened when you were abducted, because you say, what are the consequences first? What the impact, the gender impact on this? They abduct the girl and they marry them or they rape them, whatever name we wanted to give to them. There are children that are born of this, when I was interviewing most of them, of the women who came back, the Chibok girls, many of them wanted to be military or police. I wanted to say let's research the female. I said, some few of them said I wanted to be medical, but maybe the fact that they were adopted by those military, they saw themselves that they wanted to be somebody military that I can protect myself. I mean, some research need to be done there in terms of what they wanted, well, after coming back, because there are a lot of adoption, kidnapping of the young girls and of the women who came back, but also issue of trauma. When you look at the impact of them, they came back. I asked one of the lady with the baby, and I said, you are in the camp, you are safe. What do you want to do now? Will you go back if you had the possibility? But she said, yes, maybe I want to go back because I was protected there, protected quote. I was much feeling that I was protected in a way or another. Maybe the way that we are handling them when they are back, we need also to research on that and see how we can do better when we bring them back, and to support their, the school for the children, etc. So when I look at the region, the two regions, the Great Lake, the Lake Chad Basin and the others, first of all, we need to work on education. We really need to invest on education. The education of girls. We need to invest more on, especially after this. Even when I look at some of the madrasa, I saw, women in the madrasa. The madrasa is the school, Quranic schools. You could see that in the Quranic schools, when it's led by women, and we promote that with the UN system, AUE, you know, we needed to have more women leading the Quranic schools where we have a lot of young women in those regions, and to make sure that they don't just educate them on Quran, but they educate them on the health issues, on their health issues. Because the second issue that I'm going to say that we need to invest education for them to understand that this is not an ideological issue, it is something different. The other issue is the reproductive health of the young girls in those areas. They get married, and I really don't call it married at 8 years, you know, married, and what do you see? Fistula. You know, so the health, reproductive health and rights in many of this country, we really need to invest on that as well. So I think that, you know, dismantling now those extremism, those, I had a good example on Somalia, because they said that, yes, they will come for example, in one of the festival in the family, one of the events that they organize, we don't know them, but they come and blast, you know, while we are enjoying with the family. So now what they did is a program that they will detect, and it was shared by, you know, one of the women leaders who lost her son, who is really fighting against Al-Shabaab, that putting community watch system that will be able to see how those who are coming inside the family, you don't know them, and so everybody think that this is somebody who is part of the family, nobody question. Now they have been trained to make sure that they understand who is who in the village, etc. So they're helping our AMISOM and others to look into. And in the same thing, when I was in Niger, inviting the security, the intelligence and the security that we have deployed in those regions, the first time, what I did is to bring the women's groups that are also fighting and making sure that they connect. There was no connection. They were not discussing. So we bring the military, we bring the intelligence service, and they start telling them what they want to do. So we tell them, you need to be together in order to fight together, because this community are able to bring response that you need. And you need information. And if you need information, involve with the community, involve with the women, because they are the ones who are losing their family. They are the one that is, even if you enroll the men, but the women are the ones. But of course, there are suicide bombers that have been as women, female, because they married them. One of the women I met, she was married with one of them. So thinking that she's protected, but she was not protected because the men sent her to the market with a bomb, with 2 other people. So those are things that you see. And at the end of the day, maybe she will be that day, the one who will die, or the other one will die. But because they have been used and misused, at the end of the day, Shannon, is even in the traditional war we have seen before, the body of the women have been used and misused. So even with the extremism, the body of the women still be used and misused. So that's what we need to realize. But some of the response is to make sure that we empower women and we give them the right place. It's nowhere that in the Quran or anywhere in the Bible we say that women should be the ones subordinate to be a suicide bombers, for example. So those are things that we can call, those are things that are haram. And we need to have that, that message out there to say that this is not about religious. And we engage with the religious and traditional leaders. We sit down with them, we talk with them, to explain that this is your daughter, bring them to schools rather than just marrying them very early, rather than also giving them, letting them in the street. And this need to be echo everywhere. So the fight against the extremism is our own fight, all of us, not just the Africans, but all of us, because it's a global issue. It's a global issue. And I'm sure that the work done by the UN Security Council, the work done by the Peace and Security Council of the AU is because we are all at stake on this, and we need to have a common strategy to fight violence, extremism as well. I can go on and on. It's a dialogue between religious, it's a dialogue among the women themselves, different religious group. In Central African Republic, I did that, bringing the Muslim and the Christian, but also, advocating even for the Pope to come to Central Africa to have a voice and make sure that the people understand it's not religious issues, making sure that the Imam goes with the clergy and they can meet together and discuss. So those are community work that need to be amplified while we are looking into the military as well. Thank you.
Well, Madame Diop, no one could say, I don't think, after listening to this conversation, that there aren't ample reasons to be inspired and to find models and lessons for how we can all do better to incorporate gender and the different dimensions of our roles in society and the impact that it has on both our contributions as well as our different dimensions of socioeconomic well-being as a result. And so you've given us so many stories and examples of ways that reaching out across communities, including women and girls in these processes, is to the benefit of all of society, and most especially in our search collectively to reduce and to end violent armed conflict, of course, on the continent. And so we are inspired today by this conversation. It could go on for so much longer. We have many comments and questions on the chat line, which for all of our audience, we will share with Madame Diop's office, as well as Dr. Shannon Smith said, we will take on board to inform our agenda going forward for the Africa Center on Women, Peace and Security. Thank you, Madame Diop, for being so generous with your time and for joining us today to keep us focused, keep us inspired, and to move us all forward to ever more concrete actions.
Merci Kate. À nos francophones également, je voulais remercier tout le monde.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you to all the francophones. I wanted to thank everyone. We conducted this discussion in English, but I know we have interpretation. So I want to say to my francophone friends, thank you, as well as to the Lusophones. I saw that in the chat box, my friend Nancy Walker is here. She was at the center before this. She was one of the first to take part. So I just want to say hello. I want to say hello to everyone who represents the African Union who is present. As I said, I'm an alumni of ACSS. And we are going to continue working together. So I'm just very happy to have been able to join you today and to talk about this topic. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you once again, Madame Diop, and to all of our distinguished colleagues who have joined us. Indeed, we have Dr. Nancy Walker, our founding director of the Africa Center, and an inspiration ongoing for us here. On this topic especially, as well as so many more distinguished colleagues in the audience, which is a testament, I think, to the importance of this discussion and to the commitment of the broader community to move it forward and to seek the concrete solutions that we all need. So thank you once again. We look forward to another one in the future and to continuing to collaborate together. Thanks to everyone.